You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode number 64 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I am honored to be sharing a conversation that I had with my friend Juan, who I met through my years of going to the Bay Area Intergroup. Juan is our current treasurer and offered to be a guest on the podcast right after we launched. For those early episodes, I had a few specific topics like the 3 circles and a few other things that I wanted to cover before doing one-on-one interviews. And when I was finally ready to start scheduling, I had a few lined up, but then became quite busy. I'm so grateful that Juan reminded me a few months ago that he was still interested in being on the podcast, and I finally had time to record an interview with him right before our most recent intergroup meeting. During our conversation, Juan talked about being a sponsor to an inmate in San Quentin prison, and so for the reading this week, I thought I would read from the ISO pamphlet called Writing to Prisoners, Recovery Through Outreach in SAA. And this is the first 2 paragraphs, and I'll be skipping down to the end of the pamphlet. The ISO receives many requests from prisoners seeking help in recovering from compulsive sexual behavior. They usually ask for literature and ask about corresponding with a member of the SAA fellowship. Many of these prisoners have little family support, and most have very limited, if any, access to recovery resources within their institutions. The purpose of the ISO Prisoner Outreach Program is to facilitate carrying the SAA message of recovery to sex addicts inside jails and prisons. This is accomplished primarily through providing published materials to prisoners and connecting prisoners with SAA members on the outside who are willing to correspond with the prisoner. For the prisoner, this is a lifeline of recovery information and support, and for the letter writer, it is an excellent opportunity for a gratifying service beyond the local level. Skipping down to the end. The Prisoner Outreach Committee encourages members of the fellowship to sign up today and correspond with a prisoner who has expressed a desire to communicate with a member of SAA and to learn more about our program of recovery. If writing to prisoners has strengthened your own recovery, consider encouraging your sponsees and other friends in the program to become letter writers as well. And in this pamphlet, there's also contact information for the ISO, if you are interested, phone numbers and email addresses. So in addition to talking about corresponding with an incarcerated sponsee, we also covered intergroup service, which I'll expand on at the end of this episode, and then Juan shared his story about finding his way into the rooms of SAA. So without further ado, I'm ready to turn it over to that conversation. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Juan. I've known you for many years through Intergroup and have not really discussed with you what brought you into program and what your circles are and things like that. So I'm really interested to hear your story.
Well, I'll do flashbacks. In 2013, I won't say celebrating, I was in the 50th year of my addiction. And it culminated in a roundabout manner. I ostensibly was leaving my home in Florida to visit my brother who lives in Orinda in California, and while there, meet with friends. And we were going to go see the America's Cup races. That worked out. Got to see I think it was the semifinals, and got to see Oracle in the background, and got to see some dear friends that my ex-wife and I had known since before we were married. only this was a subterfuge for me visiting Jamaica on the way back to Florida to be with a girlfriend to celebrate her birthday. And
Mm.
unbeknownst to me, my wife knew about it and she thought long and hard about canceling it because she knew the hotel I was staying in and all she had to do was call the hotel. But she wanted to see if I was bound and determined to see my addiction through in terms of like a culmination. See, I can pull this off. I'm in control. And when I got home, it was definitely a come to Jesus moment because
Hmm.
I got home to the Fort Lauderdale airport and there was a message on my phone, don't come home.
Wow.
And so I didn't know what to do. So my where I lived at the time was 30 miles west of the Fort Lauderdale airport. And it took me 6 hours, but believe it or not, I walked the 30 miles. So I got
Oh,
home
geez.
I walked the next morning. I almost got run over a couple times by cars who couldn't see me in the dark, but I did get home and I thought about what my life was going to be like walking the 6 hours. And I came up with a plan for dividing assets, which was beneficial to my ex in many ways. I didn't want to fight, And I mean, if
Hmm.
I had my druthers, I'd apologize, I'd make up, I'd be good. But I'd been saying that for 50 years. So it took 6 hours, but it was truly a come to Jesus moment in my life.
Hmm.
And at the time, our son was working for a company he's still working for, only he was halfway around the world. And he said, you want me to come home? And we said, no, because we didn't want him to come home because if we couldn't work it out, we didn't want him to go down with us, so to speak. So he said, well, go see a psychiatrist, go see somebody. We didn't see a psychiatrist. We went to see a psychologist
Hmm.
and we went to about 5 sessions and it boiled down to, I can't help you, but I know an organization who can. So I went online to SAA and they have this, I don't know if it's a patented questionnaire, but they have this questionnaire that
Yeah. Yeah.
determines whether or not you're a sex addict. And I never thought about it that way. Over the decades that I was in my addiction, I can't tell you how many times I said, I wish there was something like AA that I could go to and get some help. It never occurred to me to go to the internet because I didn't think, if there was something I would have heard about.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
should, but the psychologist knew about it, and I went to a couple meetings in Hollywood, Florida, which is between the airport and Fort Lauderdale and Fort Lauderdale. And of course, I remember the first meeting I went to, I'd expected to see people with two heads and three noses and so forth.
Yeah.
And they were nice people, not super egos. Well, if they had an ego, it got deflated big time. But they were people who were regretful and knew that they had to change their lives. And I had some people reach out, and I went to a couple meetings, but my ex had given me an ultimatum. I needed to be out of the house by a certain date, and I had no idea where I was going to go. I had a girlfriend in Georgia. She said, "Yeah, why don't you come here?" And I stayed with her one night and told her my story, and she said, "You're a cheater. You're a liar. I want you to leave." So again, I still didn't know where I was going to go. And my brother, who died coincidentally or not, the day after Christmas in 2020, at the time, was living by himself here in Orinda, where I'm talking from. And he said, come live with me. I'm disabled. I need someone to get my medicines. I need somebody to tell me jokes. I need somebody to keep me company. And so I drove across country. I took my time, 7 days. And of course, I was going to go through Death Valley, but to get to Death Valley, the best way is to go through Las Vegas.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
my addiction flamed out in Las Vegas. If it hadn't flamed out enough in Jamaica, Las Vegas sent me over the top. And it was so ironic because when I was traveling west is when I can't remember who it was, when they shut down the government. And here I'm driving on I-40 through Arizona, and there's a big sign, petrified forest closed. And I
Mm.
said, how can the petrified forest be closed? I didn't believe it. So I got off at this one exit, and sure enough, the petrified forest was closed. And then it turns out that the government went all out. They closed everything.
Yeah, yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. They closed everything. And I wanted to go through Death Valley. And I called my brother and I said, can I go to Death Valley? He said, no, Death Valley's closed. So I was stuck in Las Vegas and my addiction flamed out. And I got to Orinda and I went online and I went to a Sunday afternoon meeting in Berkeley at the Lutheran Church on University. That's still
Yeah,
my home meeting. And the 10 o'clock meeting that's going on as we speak is meeting there in person, but
oh, cool.
the 4 o'clock isn't. I go to the 10 o'clock meeting in person maybe once every other month or so, and it's inspiring. John O is doing a wonderful job with it, with his owl and so forth.
Nice.
But flashing back, it's not a pretty story, but my inner circles are paying for sex with prostitutes, paying for sex with masseuse and massage parlors, paying for sex with escorts in hotels. When I was in the service in Vietnam, I made I won't say a mistake. Everybody goes on R&R. It's like sowing your wild oats. I went to
Yeah.
Thailand and I can remember, dude, I had it made. I went to this bar where they played Beatles music and they met this one woman who didn't have VD or anything. And I told her to leave the next morning, which was one of the many dumb things you do in your addiction. And so the next morning, the tradition was to go to, they called them massage parlors, but they weren't massage parlors. They had 50 gorgeous women, one more gorgeous than the other, behind one-way glass where they couldn't see you. You walk in and they give you a Saigon tea or something, and you look at all these beautiful women and you pick one out, and it's $55 for 5 days. Well, unfortunately, I got more than I bargained for. We did a lot of wonderful things. We went to kickboxing and went to see elephants pull telephone poles and all kinds of touristy things. But I came home with a dose of VD that it took an awful lot of antibiotics to knock
Mm-hmm.
out. Oh man, I was miserable. I couldn't piss to save my soul. It hurt too much. But fortunately, she didn't mess around. She got me to a urologist or whoever it is, and he shot me full of enough antibiotics to kill a horse. That's what he said, pretty much. And as I said, I got to a meeting and I had a sponsor, but then the sponsor slipped. And then I got another sponsor, and I've been with him ever since through a lot for both of us. I even was secretary for a month. That's a big responsibility at these
Yeah.
meetings. But then I slipped, and so I had to resign as secretary. And then I think I got through step 4 with my second sponsor. And this is a great story. I don't know if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. The point is, it's a great story. He and his wife were in the south of France vacationing in a loft of a friend. And I had made an appointment with a hooker through a website I won't name. It probably would be triggering. And I guess I had the foresight to make the appointment a week in advance. I said, I'm going to talk myself out of following through. But it came the day of the appointment, day before. And I called my sponsor, and somehow he got the message. I don't know how he got the message, but he couldn't call me back. So the story is he rode his bicycle 10 miles to the nearest payphone in the south of France and called me back from a payphone.
Wow.
It's a great story, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I can't change a bit of it, whether it's true or not. And he said, Juan, I understand you want to talk. He said, yeah, I have an appointment to act out, and I just wanted to let you know. And my sponsor said, why do you want to do this, Juan? Well, because I can. Because you can. Is that what governs your behavior? Because you can. Yeah, because I can. Well, I can't tell you not to, but the fact that you've gone to the trouble of getting me on my bike so I can ride 10 miles to ask why you can and why are you doing this? It sounds to me like you don't really want to do it. And I said, yes, right. I don't want to do it, but am I committed? I made an appointment. And my sponsor said, well, you're going to have to think about that. And I thanked him for his efforts to listen to me and talk to me. And I hung up and I had a bright idea. I'm going to cancel this appointment. And I did. And I haven't acted out since. I've
Wow.
come close. The 3-second rule,
Hmm.
hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When I have any of those feelings, I go read something or call something or meditate. And every day it's a struggle. But I'm thankful for the program. And there has to be a higher power for all of these things to happen. They weren't a coincidence. And I'm fortunate to be working through the steps a second time. I kind of hung up because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
while I'm working the steps, I'm working step 12 all the time. And I'm fortunate to have, uh, see, one, two, three live sponsees, one of whom I Zoom with once a week. And I see at the Alameda First Things First meeting on Wednesdays occasionally. And he's nice enough because I'm scared to death driving in Alameda. He'll
Hmm.
pick me up at the 11th Street BART station in Oakland, take me to the meeting, and bring me back. So I'm indebted to him. And I have a sponsee who's been incarcerated in San Quentin for the better part of 30 years.
Hmm.
I had the pleasure of meeting him when there was a window that was open last December, but COVID is back in force at the queue, as they call it.
Hmm.
And I haven't been able to meet with him since. And we write one another. And he really enjoyed meeting me and wants to meet me again. And we write not as often as we'd like. The mails are slipshod. He'll write a letter. It goes to ISO in Houston, and then ISO scans it and sends it to me to shorten the time. And then I write a letter back to my sponsee in San Quentin, and it goes around. But lately, I don't know. There's a problem with the mails. I'm not blaming it on the queue. I'm just blaming it on the pandemic. But
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully, we'll get together. And I'm very thankful. And you can't do your life over. But what's good about the program is no, you can't do your life over to date, but your life isn't over. You can recover and have a meaningful relationship. Since I slipped with the advice of my sponsor, I've had a meaningful monogamous relationship with a very wise woman who had me tell her story, do my first step to her, and she said, you're not doing that anymore. That doesn't mean that when I'm with her that I'm hitting up on other women for 3 seconds occasionally, but I catch myself doing it and she catches me doing it. Juan, your 3 seconds is up. And of course I talk to myself, maybe I should make it 2 seconds. So
Hmm.
that's the debate, maybe I should 3 seconds going forward, I should have in my inner circle, and then 2 seconds middle circle, and then 1 second outer circle, maybe. So a nice healthy balance.
Yeah.
I think I'm kidding myself, but it's difficult. Just to give you an example of what a small world it is, I played tennis for 10 years in Florida before I left with a fellow every Saturday morning because it's hot. We'd get on the courts at 7 o'clock and we played probably, oh, I don't know, 400 or 500 times over 10 years. I beat him twice, because I didn't know what I was doing.
Hmm.
Now
Hmm.
I'm taking lessons, so I know what I'm doing. So if I played him again, I think my percentage winning would be better.
Nice.
But what's ironic is once I got to California, I let him know that we wouldn't be playing anytime soon. And we both broke down via email. He had been an addict also and joined the program about the same time I did, but we were both too full of shame to share with one another. It took going across country to share my shame with him to find out that he was in the same boat. And given Zoom, I've offered to share with his group in Florida. It hasn't happened yet, but he knows that when it's convenient, we'll do that. So, I have a lot to be thankful for. Why don't I get a drink of water and let you ask questions or comment, and then I'll
Sure.
continue to answer whatever questions you want me to answer.
Yeah. So, you had mentioned while you were talking about that, the 3 second rule, you mentioned maybe 2 seconds in your middle circle. What other kind of behaviors do you have in your middle circle?
Pornography, and that's dicey. Pornography, I probably click on some of the allegedly free, unquote, but time is money, so it's not free. But I click on some of the allegedly free websites maybe once a month. So how much pornography do I average a month? Maybe 2 hours a month. So I've talked about it briefly with my sponsor, and he's said, "You think you can cut it down to an hour a month?" And then it's a come to Jesus decision. If I can't cut it down to an hour a month, then maybe I better, not maybe, I should think seriously about putting it in my inner circle, because it's not healthy for anybody. And one of the ways I remind myself that it's not pornography, one of my sponsees shared a saying with me. The saying goes something like this: pornography is prostitution with a camera.
Oh, wow.
And if I say that to myself every time I want to click on a quote free unquote porn site, if I say that, I think it might stop me or make me think twice or three times. So that's one tool that I need to use more often. Pornography is prostitution with a camera. If I think prostitution is in my inner circle, then who am I to rationalize or waffle and say, because I'm only hurting myself, it's not in my inner circle? So I've got several different tools I need to make use of. And to answer your question, what else is in my middle circle? Some of these websites have visual pornography, and some of them have erotica.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, erotica, there's no camera involved, but it's just as hurtful, just as damaging.
Yeah, words on a page.
Yeah, exactly. Words on a page can be scanned, so they can be photographed. So what difference does it make? What else is in my middle circle? Being brutally honest with my significant other. And a good example of that is when I started in the program, one of the readings has the phrase, working this simple program. And I wanted to scream, this is utter bullshit. There's nothing simple about it. But then I came across another little vignette. I'm dating myself. There used to be a program on TV that was very popular back in the day. Raymond Burr starred as Perry Mason.
Oh, yeah.
And there was the Perry Mason series. And always somewhere in the program, they'd have a witness take the stand before Perry Mason subjected him to a grueling cross-examination whereby the witness promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And what I've come to realize is that if your life consists of recreation's okay, as long as you're a good sport, but when you're awake, when you open your mouth or write, what you write or what you say, if it's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, it's a simple program. And so if you say it's not a simple program, then it's obvious you're not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But if you do that, it's a simple program. So that's a tool that I use,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to use it every waking hour. And so if I put that tool together with the 2 second rule, with the adage about prostitution, I think I'm going to do a better job of staying out of my middle circle, because if I spend too much time in my middle circle, then I'm lying to myself, because these activities are really inner circle. So if I sound like a hypocrite and a liar and so forth, it's all part of recovery along the way. So that's my middle circle.
Yeah.
My outer circle, just briefly, I volunteer at my local church. Except the last time I volunteered, I went to a food bank out in Pittsburgh. We all had to have our temperature taken. We all had to show vaccination cards, but we didn't have to wear masks. You could, but you didn't have to. And I get home from the food bank. This is an outreach program of my church. And I get a call. Since you were at the kitchen on such and such a day, just wanted to let you know that one of the volunteers there tested positive for COVID. So I was
Mm-hmm.
furious. So I stopped volunteering temporarily at the food bank. And the problem is, if you can be a hermit on BART, the requirement is now, I think it's through February of 2023, that BART says you have to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about 80% of the riders wear a mask. The BART police say since the pandemic started, they've arrested 7 people for not wearing a mask. Let's just say that quite a bit more than 7 people ride BART without wearing masks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's difficult. But, as I said, I play tennis, I take lessons, so I'm volunteering in terms of the tennis pro. The tennis pros have had a hard time of it during the pandemic because their business is down. So I'm volunteering to to the benefit of my local tennis pro. I volunteer at the local library. And if I'm not scared to death of doing something that's helping the community, I'll do it. And of course, the case in point is writing to incarcerated addicts,
Yeah.
meeting with unincarcerated addicts. And I'm just blessed that the end of this month will be 100 months of sobriety, but there's no guarantee I'm going to make it, because
Mm-hmm.
unless I'm a hermit, writing BART is triggering. This is supposed to be funny, but it's serious. One of the good things about the pandemic is women wear masks. So in terms of visualizing, fantasizing, it's more difficult to visualize and fantasize about them because they're
Mm-hmm.
wearing masks. So if I had to single out a good thing about the pandemic in terms of my not acting out, that would be it. So I've dwelt on my inner circle, my middle circle, and my outer circle, and I'm blessed to be alive. And the last thing I'll mention is, besides the program, the other thing that changed my life is my dearly departed brother, because before he died, the day after Christmas 2020, he spent $5,000 putting a new liner in his above ground pool. It's one of these endless
Mm-hmm.
pools with them.
Yeah.
You swim against the current. And I exercised there for 3 or 4 months a year. It's great exercise. And I don't have to go to the gym and worry about touching machines that maybe they weren't cleaned as well as they have. In addition, my brother, uh, there's a treatment for roofs. It's called fogging. It's this white foam that goes on the roof that prevents leaks for
Okay.
guaranteed for 20 years. And of course, the irony, he did that. He spent another $5,000. And then he redid the deck in the back. So we have a beautiful deck in the back. We have the above ground pool in the back, and we have a roof that won't leak. The irony is, Sunrun approached us the other day because we'd taken a bunch of trees out. And from the perspective of sunlight,
Mm-hmm.
it can have solar panels put in. But apparently there's some issue. I don't understand. There's some technical issue with foam roofs that
Oh,
solar
geez.
panels won't work. I'm not sure what it is, but they would work, but I'm not saying you have to take out the phone, but it's a major issue that they're not prepared to do because the tax credits only go so far. And my brother did all these things. The only thing he didn't do is put in solar panels, but I'm so thankful for him. He spent $15,000 in the few weeks before he died for my older nephew and I, and we live in the house rent free. So if God had a plan for us as to our life post my brother's death, it couldn't be more perfect. All I have to do is come up with the property tax every year. But given that I'm not paying rent, I'm able, by not acting out, to save
Hmm.
enough money to pay the property tax every year.
Nice.
So I will shut up.
I was going to mention we got about 10 minutes here. The way that we know each other is through intergroup, and we have our intergroup
Yeah.
meeting in just a little bit, and we're going to stop it
Okay.
short so we have that little transition time. But
Yeah. I
I
have
want,
two promises, if I may.
yeah,
The first is I was going to go to the camp out this year up at Bear River, but it
yeah, yeah.
turns out that the dates conflict. My girlfriend and I were flying to Minneapolis
Uh-huh.
that day, and we're going to be 14 nights on the Mississippi River on
Oh,
a paddle
nice.
wheel. Yeah, so I can't make the camp out this year, but I'll make it next year. The
Yeah.
other promise is the next time you have a gig, I don't care if it's snowing, I'm going to come down to your gig and hear you rock out with Tool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I keep promising, but I haven't broken the promise yet. So
Yeah. Hopefully next March we'll have the retreat in person
yeah.
for the first time since 2019. So,
Okay, so you'll be in the talent portion of the talent,
yeah.
no talent show. All
Yeah.
right. Okay, let's think positive.
Yeah. But yeah, I did want to ask you about how you got into service work and the work that you do with Intergroup.
Let's see. Well, I was going to the Sunday afternoon meeting, and they have elections every 6 months, and I can't remember who the intergroup rep was, but they were said the intergroup rep position is open, and I said, "What's it about?" Oh, I remember. I was invited. Intergroup was meeting in San Francisco, and I think went
Hmm.
once or twice. From Bill I was the chair, and there was a problem with the keys. And I went once or twice to San Francisco, and we never met because whoever had the keys didn't show up. So I was
Yeah.
discouraged. But then somebody had the bright idea of having intergroup at the Lutheran Church in Berkeley, and we seemed to have a handle on the keys for that. So I
Hmm.
went as the intergroup rep. And let's see. Oh, Howard C., he put, oh, talk about service. He was the
Hmm.
treasurer for about 5 or 6 years,
At
got
least,
us
yeah.
incorporated, got us insurance, got us to the point where individual officers and the whole organization is less likely to be found personally liable. And so I volunteered, and Howard turned over the reins to me, intergroup treasurer.
Hmm.
I have one more filing to do for this year, and then I'm going to make sure that Tim I is at the meeting where we agree on new officers because he wasn't at the meeting where we were talking about. So I
Yeah.
was treasurer for a second year. And it's really it's necessary to be treasurer for 2 years because the
Yeah.
first year you have no clue. The second year it's almost a piece of cake. So that I'm looking forward to. And I'm also the vice chair of the ICC,
Hmm.
and I put my name in the hat to be on Litcom. So to be of service, it's not about egos. It's about to do what you can for the addict who still suffers.
Hmm.
And the last thing I'll mention is that this fiscal year, starting July 1st, here's a plug for Intergroup. I probably shouldn't do this. Contributions are way down, and ISO is not in good shape financially. So we need not a loan, but we need a big daddy to come to the rescue, is one way of visualizing how we get back on track. the good news is we've got the money safe for the retreat next March, and a lot to be thankful for, but there's a lot of work to do. And so that's why I'm doing 12-step work. By example, we'll get other people to step up, because what you don't want is the same people doing the work over and over, because if they
Yeah.
don't get burned out, they die, or things worse. My
Yeah.
name is Juan. I'm a sex addict, and I'm glad to be able to share.
Thank you so much. And, I love at Intergroup when we're doing the fiscal stuff that you put in a line there that this helps pay for the world famous Sex Addicts Recovery podcast. That always gives me a chuckle. So.
Right.
Anyway, I am so super grateful that we finally got to do this. You volunteered to be on the podcast right when we started, and it's taken me a long time to get you scheduled, but I'm so grateful for that.
But will you let me know when I'm likely to be? This can be viewed by anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Yep.
Once it's okay.
Yeah. So this should be probably next week's episode. So
wow. Okay.
I'm starting to bank interviews. On Monday, I'll be talking to the PICPC committee with the ISO. And then I've got a couple of recordings that I'm waiting for from the SAA and COSA speaker meeting. And so once I get enough of those banked, it'll be nice to be able to line up what episodes will fall when. But a lot of times, the interview happens on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I try to get it turned around by Friday. And that's a pretty quick turnaround. But so as far as I know, your episode will be the next one to go up.
All right. Well, I appreciate your service, and I can't wait to hear Tool next March or soon. Who knows?
All right. Thanks, Juan. And I will
welcome.
See you in about 10 to 15 minutes on Intergroup.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. See you, Juan. Thanks again to Juan for joining me on this conversation. I was glad that we were finally able to reschedule the recording right before our intergroup meeting. So continuing from what Juan just mentioned toward the end of our talk, since the pandemic, individual and meeting donations have been down. Back in the old days, we would have passed a basket around the room to collect funds for our rent and literature. Anything left over would be passed on to Intergroup and the ISO. Without a physical basket being passed around on Zoom meetings, many times links are shared on ways to donate to the ISO. And I've noticed that our in-person meetings being smaller than they once were, our baskets are collecting fewer funds that are enough to keep the meeting self-sustaining, but don't give us enough funds to pass on to our intergroup and to the ISO. And on this podcast, I don't often make pleas for donations, but if you're able to give anything to the San Francisco Bay Area Intergroup or to the ISO, I know it would be greatly appreciated. And I'll leave links in the show notes. Our intergroup, which funds this podcast, has a PayPal account, which is BAISAA payment only at gmail.com. And for the ISO, you can always text the letters SAA to 91999 to get to the link for donations. The ISO also has something called Lifeline Partners, which sets up a monthly recurring donation, whether it's $1, $100, or even $1,000. And again, I will leave links for this program, the Lifeline Partners, and other ways to donate to the ISO in the show notes. And with that being said, I'd like to move on to a few listener emails and comments. And just a few comments recently from the YouTube videos that are up. One on episode 4, which was on the 3 circles, a tool of recovery. Someone writes in, "Thanks for the info on the 3 circles." And this is one of the episodes that I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast that I wanted to schedule a topic discussion around the 3 circles towards the first few episodes of the podcast before moving to more personal one-on-one conversation with other sex addicts. Another comment that we got was just on the episode from last week, which was on Joe and Charlie, Step 4, Part 1. And the comment says, Higher power keeps showing me things just when I need it. Thanks, Jason. And you're very welcome. And again, what I plan to do with both Step 4 and with the Joe and Charlie stuff, with Step 4, I plan to do a group conversation around Step 4. And with Joe and Charlie, there are a couple of other segments that I want to cover. When they do talk about Step 4, it is quite a lengthy conversation and goes over a couple of hours. So I'll be chopping those up into shorter segments and hopefully sharing those on future episodes of the podcast when I don't have anything scheduled. Thanks for writing those comments on YouTube. Always greatly appreciated. And now I'd like to move on to some emails. And again, I will be leaving the names anonymous. Hi, I'm a sex addict from Leeds in the UK. A member of our Leeds SAA group shared your podcast with us, and I've been listening to the backlog of episodes. I've listened to a few now, back to back, and felt compelled to send you a thank you message. Listening to the readings and guest presentations has made me quite emotional, but at the same time, a huge feeling of gratitude that I am a part of this program. Your podcast is another support tool, and I send you heartfelt thanks. I'm currently preparing my Step 8 list, and it is a difficult but cathartic step. If I can help with anything in the future, please let me know. And I will definitely be reaching out to you if you want to be a further guest or part of a panel. And thank you so much for writing in. We have another email asking about LJ and the book that he wrote, and I've sent along that information. I'm looking forward to my noon group. Just recently, we got a long message from LJ to let us know how he's been doing, and one of our members is going to be reading that long letter in our fellowship hour on Monday, so I'm really excited about that. Here's another one, and it says, Hello, I discovered your podcast over a month ago, and I'm absolutely hooked. It's meeting everything I need met in my journey to recovery. I told my therapist about this podcast, and he wanted to know if there was any way to get this podcast on MP3 or MP4 tracks so he could share them with the people he counsels that are on the forensic side of things and are not allowed internet access. I wasn't sure if there's any way to receive some of the episodes so I can share them with him, and maybe he could put them on a flash drive or a CD for them to listen to, but I really think they would benefit. Either way it goes, I am thankful for this podcast. I look forward to getting to the current timeline of your podcast. I'm almost caught up and still have a lot more to listen to, and hopefully someday I could be part of an episode. Thanks again for the strength and hope in everything you do. Signed, D. And yes, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate feedback like that. And yeah, I will see what I can do to provide some MP3s. There are a few ways that I can think of, either by Dropbox or by flash drive. One of the things that my local group has done is we bought these little cheap MP3 players for $20 on Amazon and loaded them with recovery talks, including the Joe and Charlie stuff that I've talked about, including recordings from past ISO conventions and speakers, things like that, as a way for us to listen to this information. And this was years and years before doing the podcast. And also the new ISO website called saa-connect.org, which has a lot of those types of recordings as well. But yeah, in the past, we had a bunch of MP3s, and it was a wonderful way to have another tool of recovery, especially for people who can't do streaming, can't do internet access. It's important that there is a way to make that available. So I will be in contact with you to see if there's anything that I can do to get that info to your therapist. There's another one that came in a few weeks ago. This is a regular new member to our noon Zoom meetings, and said, you mentioned that we can shoot you an email if we're interested in participating. I thought I would reach out after my sponsor said go for it. I guess my story may be useful to some folks. I spent the last 10 years in Africa not getting sober, and then 10 months ago finally got to sobriety and left Africa. I'm an American currently living in Portugal. I'm here to serve anytime you need. Thanks again for your service. This podcast is great. And yes, I have been in contact with this individual, and I am hoping to have him on an episode soon. The time difference between California and Portugal is quite great. So trying to work out a time that will be convenient for both of us. Any time that I've interviewed people from the UK, it's about the same time difference that I can tell. So I will be scheduling that in the future. But yeah, really, really grateful for that email. And I think that's pretty much all I have in terms of emails and YouTube comments. And so, yeah, if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you'd like to leave feedback for the podcast to be read here on an episode, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. You can leave comments on the YouTube channel. And I haven't checked in a while, but Apple Podcasts allows for ratings and reviews. We can always appreciate any new reviews coming in. And so, yeah, I think that is about all I have for this week. I just got my copy of Heilung's new album, Drift, and I have been listening to it. I've had a hard time editing this podcast because I've been listening to a lot of the songs that I haven't heard yet. The album officially comes out tomorrow, but my CD arrived a couple of days early, so I've been really getting into that. And there are a few songs that I will be sharing on future episodes of the podcast. And I'm recording this just in case I wanted to drop a little bit of the first song on the Drift album, which is called Asia. This has been out for a few weeks on YouTube and on streaming. Anyway, I got the digibook version of the CD, which includes 128 pages of runes and lyrics and descriptions of the songs, as well as photographs and artwork. Anyway, for the song Asia, it says, Maria sings to the listener of love, recovery, and prosperity, chasing away evil and welcoming love. The piece contains a quotation of some lines of Navamal, combined with a selection of blessing words meant to provide help to the listener in a troubled time. So I'll play a little bit of that. And again, that was Maria singing a little bit, and then Maria and Kai, the deep voice there. Anyway, this song has just been mellow, and I've been really, really digging this. A few episodes ago, I had mentioned the song Tenant, and there's some great stuff in there, and the song Nesso, which is just amazingly beautiful. So anyway, I'll be talking about those on a future episode. And so with that, I will end this episode. I thank you so much for tuning into this one. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.